In the past 2 weeks, journalists around the world have reported at length about the tensions between India and Pakistan. The Balakot strike, the dogfight, the ceasefire violations, the diplomatic tension and everything that followed. But there's one story that has been completely ignored, buried. The story of F-16 fighter jets, the ones that Pakistan used against India. Let's tell you the story once again. On the 26th of February, that's last week, Pakistan violated the Indian airspace. It dropped bombs near a defense installation. This was after the Indian Air Force bombed Jaish terror camps in Pakistan. So Pakistan tried to hit back. India resisted. India chased the Pakistanis away. And in the process, India shot down a Pakistani F-16 jet. It was, in fact, the jet of Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman that was involved in this operation. That jet also crashed. The focus remained on the Indian pilot and the MiG he was flying. The Pakistani pilot and the plane were barely mentioned. Pakistan insisted it wasn't an F-16. The military issued a point-blank denial. They never used an F-16 in this operation, they said. Listen in.
अलावा मैं इंडियन मीडिया पे देख रहा था कि उन्होंने कहा कि पाकिस्तान का एक F-16 उन्होंने भी गिराया है। पहली बात तो ये कि पाकिस्तान ने इस तमाम जो एक्शन था उसमें F-16 इस्तेमाल नहीं किया और ऐसी कोई खबर नहीं है कि पाकिस्तान का कोई जहाज गिरा हो।
Soon enough, India presented proof to debunk this plane. This theory, in fact. This is what the proof looked like. The pictures on your screens. This is part of an AMRAAM missile, the one that was used by Pakistani jets on Indian targets. How does it prove the use of F-16s? Because these are the only jets that support AMRAAM missiles. It is no secret that America sold both to Pakistan, the F-16 jets and the AMRAAM missiles.
Pakistan also stated that no F-16s were used in the operation and no Pakistani plane was downed by Indian Air Force. There is enough evidence to show that F-16s were used in this mission through the electronic signatures, and thereafter the Pakistan is trying to hide this fact. Also, parts of AMRAAM air-to-air missile, which is carried only on the Pakistan F-16s, was recovered east of Rajouri within the Indian territory. Therefore, the fact remains that one F-16 of PAF was shot down by a IF MiG-21 Bison.
So why has Pakistan been lying? Why is it at pains to prove that it wasn't an F-16? There are two reasons for this. One is pressure from America and second is pressure from the makers of F-16, Lockheed Martin. Let me explain. When America sold these F-16 jets to Pakistan, it had imposed certain restrictions. The contract reportedly says that Pakistan can only use these F-16s in self-defense or anti-terror operations. The strike last week was neither. It was a blatant attack on Indian installations. Pakistan had violated the agreement with America. So what is America going to do about it? For a week now, they've been, quote-unquote, looking into it. That's diplomacies for doing nothing. What is there to look into? It was a violation, plain as day. Today, an Indian reporter sought answers from the US State Department, and this is the response he got.
One quick thing, India has, on use of F-16 by Pakistan, State Department and the US Embassy in Islamabad said it is looking for more information on that, either in potential misuse of F-16 by Pakistan, and what information you are seeking from.
So we're taking a look, and we're going to continue to.
It is clear that the Americans will not punish Pakistan. It is also clear that nobody expected Pakistan to stick to the agreement. It was a defense deal with a rogue regime. What did the world expect? Of course, they violated the agreement. Since the 1980s, Pakistan has bought several batches of the F-16 jets from the US. The last purchase was under the Bush administration in 2008. But in 2016, America cut off the subsidized sale of this jet to Pakistan. For several years now, the F-16 has been the workhorse of the Pakistani Air Force. No wonder then that they want to prove that it was not misused. The second worry is the company, as I mentioned, Lockheed Martin. F-16 is a superior jet compared to the MiG-21 Bison, and yet an Indian MiG shot down an American F-16. A vintage fighter shot down a modern plane. It reflects very poorly on the company, and so Lockheed Martin wants this story buried. This is not a one-off. let me put this in context as well. America is the largest weapons supplier in the world. American companies earn billions in defense deals. The question worth asking here is this: are companies and governments that profit from defense deals complicit if their weapons are used to cause harm? Why was Pakistan, which has a track record of backing terror groups, allowed to access high-end weaponry like the F-16 jet? America justified it as deterrence against India. Back in 2008, Ann Patterson, the then US ambassador to Pakistan, had presented this exact argument to make a case for Islamabad. Patterson had argued that if Pakistan is allowed to have the F-16, it will act as a deterrent in an Indo-Pak conflict. And that's not all. The Bush administration even gave financial assistance to Pakistan to buy the F-16 and related weapons. Basically, America funded the sale of American-made weapons in Pakistan. It also gave Pakistan 500 AMRAAM missiles to fire using the very same F-16 jets. Billions of dollars were made in these deals. The company that benefited the most was Lockheed Martin. Now, here's something we should underscore. Lockheed Martin is the largest arms manufacturer in the world. They've been trying to sell these jets to India as well. The Indian Air Force is looking to buy more multi-role combat aircraft, and Lockheed Martin's F-16 is one of the contenders. The company has tied up with India's Tata Group for this purpose. Lockheed Martin has offered to move the production of the F-16 to India if it wins the contract. You can imagine how keen they are to enter the Indian market. Here's more on their record. Last year, the company was slammed after a school bus in Yemen was attacked. The Saudi-led coalition had carried out a devastating attack, leaving dozens of children dead. The bomb that was dropped on the school bus was made by Lockheed Martin. It's one of the stories that they will not want you to discuss. What happened last week is another such story, a blot on the company's record. If India's Soviet-era jets can down the F-16, why would the Indian Air Force buy them? Why would anyone buy F-16s? Lockheed Martin wants this story buried because it jeopardizes a potential deal. It wants to sell India 100 fighter jets, F-16s, the kind that a MiG-21 shot down. It is bad news for the company. There's no two ways about it. Bad news for the American government as well. This government, the Donald Trump government, has been pushing India to give up Russian-made arms and buy from America instead. The fact is that wars are good news for arms manufacturers. As conflict situations spike, the weapons trade swells. Huge profits are made. Wars suit vested interests. Arms lobbies dictate foreign policies. Lots of parties make money in this process. Experts say that right now we are in the midst of the biggest arms race since the Cold War. The global arms bazaar is buzzing. There is cutthroat competition for every defense deal. Our next report has the lowdown.
Bloody conflicts and military tensions around the world are on the rise. And that's why every country wants to increase its arsenal. According to the Stockholm International Peace Institute, demand for major weapons went up by 10% between 2012 and 2017. The high demand has turned arms trade into a thriving global industry. According to a report, the total international arms trade is pegged at around $100 billion per year. In the past, America and Russia dominated weapons trade. A large chunk of orders for weapons still goes to these two countries. The US remains the largest arms exporter in the world. 42 American firms are among a list of the world's top 100 arms producers and military services companies. But newer players from China and Israel are also making their presence felt in the global arms bazaar. China has steadily risen as the world's fifth largest seller of arms. China also has the second largest defense budget in the world after America. Beijing is spending more on its defense forces and in building sophisticated weapon systems. Whether it is warplanes, missiles, guns or tanks, selling weapons remains one of the most lucrative businesses in the world. But weapon sales are not just a business proposition for the developed world. They use it also as an effective foreign policy tool to push their own global agenda. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
True that. Arms lobbies tend to be so powerful they can have a lasting impact on a country's foreign policy. Take the case of Myanmar, for example. The country's treatment of the Rohingya refugees earned widespread condemnation from the West. But Israel sat tight with Myanmar. The reason was simple. Myanmar was a defense market. Israel sold advanced weapons to Myanmar in the middle of the crisis. The implication is clear. Foreign policy is dictated by defense partners. Put simply, countries ally with those who supply them arms or who buy their arms. Countries do not compromise on their defense interests for any reason whatsoever. For Myanmar, Israel is a close ally and vice versa. This equation is not an exception. Take the case of Pakistan and the United States, and now Pakistan and China. Traditionally, the US supplied arms to Pakistan while Russia was India's partner of choice. Soon after independence, the US wanted to hedge Pakistan against the Soviet influence in the region. The US sold arms worth billions of dollars to Pakistan and overlooked the threat of terror until terror came calling to the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. Even then, vested interests prevailed for very long. Pakistan was declared an ally in the war on terror and given more arms. It has taken many, many years and loss of American assets for them to cut aid to Pakistan. China's case is no different. They're reluctant to take a tough stance on terrorism in Pakistan. The reason is arms, weapons. China is now Pakistan's biggest defense partner. China needs Pakistan to buy arms, and that takes precedence over everything else. What does that tell you? The same applies to India. It's the world's biggest defense importer, and the so-called strategic friends expect benefits. How have defense deals impacted India's foreign policy? India is a unique case. It has recently awarded a deal worth $777 million to Israel Aerospace Industries to supply air and missile defense systems for the Indian Navy. Bilateral partnership in defense between India and Israel has crossed more than $6 billion in the last 3 years alone. It's no coincidence then that India and Israel have ties now which are stronger than ever before in history. And other countries want a piece of this pie, including the US. Washington sees an opportunity in India, and so it has bestowed major defense partner status to India. That's what it calls India now, a major defense partner. What does the status do? This makes technology transfer possible from the US to India, and that US expects will attract India into buying their defense equipment. They're very keen to sell to India. The irony is that all these are done brazenly. COMCASA agreement, for instance, caused tensions on India's oil imports from Iran. Sometimes arms sales could also lead to downplaying the ability of the domestic defense manufacturers. In simple words, propaganda to make domestic defense manufacturing inferior. Foreign players want India to buy, and so they're going to try and make Indian defense manufacturers look poorer, look inferior. The MiG-21 Bison jets are made in India now. Tejas and Sukhoi fighter jets are also made in India, and yet there is a clamor to favor defense imports over homemade arms. We often hear how the Bofors artillery was a defining factor in the Kargil war. We now hear the need for the Rafale jets. Of course, we need to modernize our defense and buy state-of-the-art equipment, but should it come at the cost of self-reliance? All these lead to a simple question. Should the powerful arms lobby be allowed to dictate foreign policy, and how is India getting impacted? One way to cut down on buying defense equipment from others is simply to make in India, to make at home. Just days after President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un's second meeting on US-Korea peace talks was held in Vietnam, South Korea's spy agency reported that North Korea has restored part of a missile launch site. Experts believe that North Korea appears to be rebuilding a key long-range rocket site it promised to scrap as a possible sign of its displeasure over the collapse of denuclearization talks at the second summit. Here's the report.
North Korea has an incredible, brilliant economic future. if they make a deal. But they don't have any economic future if they have nuclear weapons. It's really a bad thing for them.
It was a clear message to North Korea. Give up the pursuit of nuclear weapons. A message that has clearly not been taken seriously by the Kim Jong-un regime. A recent briefing by South Korea's spy agency noted that North Korea has started restoring structures at its Sohi satellite launching station. On the launch pad, 2 support cranes are observed at the building. Walls have been erected and a new roof added. At the engine test stand, it appears that the engine support structure is being reassembled. 2 cranes are present and construction material is spread across the stand's apron. The North had previously begun dismantling the rail-mounted transfer building on the launch pad along with the engine test stand last year. This dismantling started after the first summit held between US President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. Recent commercial satellite imagery, however, show that efforts to rebuild these structures have resumed recently, sometime between 16th February and 2nd March. This news comes just days after talks for a denuclearization deal between Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Hanoi had ended abruptly. Differences had arisen between the two leaders on how far North Korea was willing to limit its nuclear program and the degree of US willingness to ease sanctions.
We have to have sanctions, and he wants to denuke, but he wants to just do areas that are less important than the areas that we want. We know the country very well, believe it or not. We know every inch of that country, and we have to get what we have to get, because that's a big give.
Despite the disagreement, both sides attempted to gloss over the rift, noting that they had parted ways amicably, with President Trump even showing great faith in the North Korean leader.
Chairman Kim promised me last night is regardless, he's not going to do testing of rockets and nuclear. Not going to do testing. So, I trust him and I take him at his word. I hope that's true.
Far from what Trump believes, experts are of the view that the rebuilding of the nuclear site is an act of retribution by Kim after Trump refused to lift the sanctions. Though the Sohi launch facility is also used by North Korea to launch satellites and other technology missions. Recent developments on the site are perceived to be for getting the Trump administration's attention and possibly to bring Washington back to the negotiating table. Bureau Report, WION World is One.